Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
I'd like to call to order the June 12th, 2025 meeting of the Fitch-Rona EMS Commission. Roll call.
Roberts.
Here.
Fafadari. Here. Lepper.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Lytle.
Here.
Fusco.
Here.
Lonsdorf.
Here.
Paul.
Here.
Luganbo.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
Dostalek.
Here.
Anders.
Here.
Thank you. Any public comment? No public comment. Moving on to the fun stuff. Pinning of paramedic intern Ava Montemayor.
So we'll come on up to the middle here to our little marks. So to the commission and family that is here and our handful of employees that come here, it's an important milestone we're celebrating here with Ava. She is our second of all of our hopefully future new interns here. So 2 years ago, Ava was sworn in as a EMT basic here with Fitch-Rona, and now 2 years later, a successful graduate of the paramedic internship program. Yes, it's a huge accomplishment. So what we'd like to do today, as she started as an EMT basic 2 years ago, she has now earned her successful associate degree in paramedic science. So we're going to trade out her EMT badge with a paramedic badge, and unofficially, we don't sew it on there, but unofficially replace her EMT rocker with her paramedic rocker, as we are all given that first EMT license when we first become EMTs, and we watch it grow with each one of those levels. Huge accomplishments that she has joined the ranks of all of the rest of us here. So we'll pass it over to Jeremy to change out her badge. The official taping of the paramedic rocker on top of the badge. Yeah, and should recognize that, so Jeremy Owen is one of our paramedics here, and he's actually was Ava's mentor for the last 2 years. So it is a huge partnership in learning over the course of those 2 years as you develop your skills and, again, to becoming the future paramedic that you are and you will be, and the rest of us still 25 years later still trying to figure out what we're doing. So did you want to say anything?
Sure. As celebrate your 2 years with me.
Celebrating, tolerating.
So just if you started your career with Fitch-Rona, wherever it takes you, you'll always be a Fitch-Rona paramedic for us. Yeah, congratulations.
I guess I can share. Next month, we have actually picked a new intern, chosen. We had 2 applicants for next year's internships. We have actually chosen a new intern that will start with us this fall. Hopefully, we'll be swearing her in July. It's kind of exciting. She is actually a resident of Fitchburg. So it's our first Fitchburg intern. And then we currently still have Katarina Tao, who will be starting her 2nd year this fall.
That woman looks so young. She's probably revealing my own age, but she's 20. Oh my God. That's an accomplishment. That's good.
Yeah, we're at that stage. What's happening? All right, thank you. Moving on, the next is review and approval of the meeting minutes from May 8th, which are handed out in the meeting packet. Any questions or comments about those meeting minutes? Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. And in my haste to get in here, is anybody online? No, none of the members. We're all here. Oh my gosh. We should have got ice cream or something. I'm buying ice cream. All right, Chief's report.
Thank you. As you can see it on the screen there, was sent out in your packets. We only ended up with only 411 calls last month, which was down 1%, right, for the first time in probably about 18 months. But as you can see, still overall for the year tracking at just about 15%. It's going to be almost right now still looking at about 900 calls over last year, and it doesn't seem to be slowing, at least over the last couple of weeks. So continuing to stay busy. Other information that you see there, as usual, still like to report, right, all of our trucks were out in April, or I should say May, 13 times last month, and then to this date, 23 times we were out of ambulances, and neighboring ambulances actually had to come in to our district to take care of our residents. So right on par again with that 40 sometimes this last year where we required outside help. So as we continue to look forward in the future and increase our staffing, those are the numbers I like to watch. So averaging about 15 calls a day, right? So that average is somewhere between, I love how averages work. It's somewhere between 5 and 30. It's kind of hit or miss with us. The nature of what we do. Lots of community events that went on there. We actually did host the UW medical students get like a crash course in mass casualty, and we actually hosted at the Fitch-Rona Fire Station this year. So they come through, the docs do some kind of triage with them, how to do some mass casualty assessments. We worked with them. Lane, Devin, and our on-duty crews came in and actually did some base hospital exercises with some little paper, I think you want to there was little paper patients, so they had to go triage them and call them into the hospital, and then the county came in and did some other stuff. So really fun that we were able to support that kind of for the future emergency medicine docs in our area. Other information you see there, right, pretty straightforward from what we usually see. I don't think it was on there last month. They finally have implemented, I guess, the sunset program, I think is what they called it. So all of our previous accounts, which was with Three Rivers Billing Company that EMSMC, our current billing company, bought out in November of 23, all of those accounts have now been transferred over to be managed through EMSMC. So that aging report is truly, right, all encompassing of both of those billing companies. Finally uniting, and so that's where we're at. This is, I don't say feel good for the first time in probably 18 months about this, as you've kind of looked and seen that over 180 days and some of the challenges that were presented with the two different billing companies. But looks like we're pretty back to where we were prior to the Three Rivers buyout. Cash on hand for you to look at there. The FAP funds, as I talked about last month, you will see that big deposit, the $162,000 sitting in there in our FAP funds. We did get a donation from the St. Christopher's Council of Women in Verona. They gave us a $500 donation last month, and then you'll see from our June milestones there, Molly Jesberger, who was with us as a part-timer and full-timer for 23 years. And then we've got the group that we hired for the new station in July in June and July. So Ryan Robertson and Jamie Cam, who's our five-year LTE. Ava, who's started 2 years ago as an intern and now is a new graduate. Katarina Tao, who's our 1 year intern, and then Tom Bates, who we probably should have him come in here at some point, right? Who is our volunteer, our last volunteer, who's actually been with us for 35 years. Still comes in on Sundays and rides from 11 to 4, just kind of for something to do. Every year he says he's going to give it up, and he keeps coming back but really glad to have him. I think this will be his last cycle. Other updates, we actually did, as I kind of shared last month, they don't like to be recognized, but thank you, Epic, gave us a donation. So our EMS bikes that we have were just coming up on about 13 years old. So we actually put in a grant with them to replace those EMS bikes with e-bikes. So we were actually awarded a grant to purchase 2, and they're decked out EMS bikes. So brand new bags in the back, heavy duty frames. Actually have little built-in flashing lights on them, super fancy. But that'll be phenomenal as kind of our older bikes are kind of hitting the end of their life. And then the other thing I think I had shared is an inflatable rehab shelter. So currently the trailer that we use, about 3 years ago, repurposed a trailer from the county, as opposed to having chairs and all the things when we go to fire rehab or large events that we need to help support the firefighters when they come to us for medical rehab. Spread out between 3 different stations, we repurposed that trailer from the county and put everything in one big trailer. With that is a little pop-up tent, right, just to try to keep us out of the elements. I lean more to the last 2 big fires that we responded to. One was in Fitchburg, one was out in Cross Plains. I truly look at it as a regional asset. It goes out of our district about as many times as it comes within our district. One, right, because we've got the ability to staff it and we have the equipment. I will say Deer Grove, which is Deerfield and Cottage Grove. They have a similar asset. We did such a phenomenal job. The first time it actually ever went out was on a fire in Deerfield. They were really impressed with it. So Deer Grove actually purchased one as well, or got one donated. So the similar assets actually live on the east side of the county. But the last 2 fires came in at about 6:30. I went out with the rehab trailer myself and set it up in the pouring rain. So we got an inflatable rehab shelter now. So within about 5 minutes or so, it actually will inflate to about the same size as a pop-up tent, but now it will actually have walls, sides on it, and can actually be heated and cooled, and Patrick doesn't have to be out in the rain anymore. Epic actually was donated that to us as well. So once all that stuff gets delivered, we can pop it up in the parking lot and thank them, and you can kind of see the abilities we have for our staff here to support our firefighters. Other update, as I've shared, the Medicaid supplement program for it was retroactive 2023, 2024. 2023 was submitted last month. 2024 is due this month, and then from then it'll be moving forward. So that is in. I've talked to kind of my peers around the county. We all have very different numbers, so none of us really know the number we're looking at to actually see what we will or won't get back for that report. But it is submitted. And then if you haven't seen the phenomenal, it was EMS Week about 2 weeks ago. So I put out a shout out to Jeremy and Nick from FACTv, who always make me look really good on TV. I know Jeff has done some spots with them as well. Jeremy's just really easy to talk to. So it's out on YouTube. There's a link to it on our website. But yeah, Jeremy just makes it really easy to do those interviews. So thank you to those two for helping us to celebrate EMS Week. That's what I have for Chief's report. Oh, sure.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Can you just remind us what you use the e-bikes for?
So a couple events we use them for. The biggest ones is when we are out actually at Epic for their XGM, their UGM, and their company picnic. We will, because we can use them inside, and it's such a big campus, we'll actually use the bikes to bike around the campus. Because we can't get inside, so we can ride them through the halls and the large learning centers. And then we will also use them out at the Atlanta Energy Center to just ride around, because it's easier to go through crowds that way.
All right. So for crowded events, basically, I was trying to imagine like who's out on the e-bikes.
Yeah.
That's
so,
it. Yeah. Okay.
We actually have packs in the back. So each one of the bikes has an AED, an oxygen mask, a small kind of a first response epinephrine nitro paste, basic bandage controls, vital signs stuff. So yeah, we can essentially ride through the crowds and get there faster while we're waiting for the ambulance to
the
come.
big quarter. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
As far as the IGA goes, it's that there's not much more than I shared with you the last time about some of the changes. It did go in front of the Fitch-Rona City Council, Patrick, last night. They did approve it with the changes. I think really the only changes that were from the last time were some pretty minutia kind of wording. I don't know when it goes in front of the town. Have you even remotely heard of it coming to the town soon?
At our last board meeting, the town chair said they were still in negotiations, still trying to get a few things worded up. So our town board meeting already happened, so it'll probably be July.
Okay.
So
My guess is you'll see it in July. It sounds like they kind of agreed on those last couple of little things to clarify some stuff. And then I talked actually with the mayor today. Sounds like she's going to try to get it on the Fitchburg Council meeting. I don't know that it's going to happen yet in June, so it'll probably be the last one in July. But it is out there. I will try to get the copy of the corrected version or the most current version and share it with you all so that you're very aware of what it looks like. Truly, the big things it did was it changed the financing structure from equalized value to the combination of equalized value per capita and call volume. With that, it changed to proportional representation of commissioners. Lots of language on should the district decide to dissolve or when the entities pull out, how that actually gets broken down. Nothing really largely operational other than that. So, Patrick, do you have anything other than what you guys talked about last night?
No, I think as you said, the changes from the previous version we'd seen were pretty minor and incorporated. I think the town was kind enough to provide, have their council do some of the last tweaks. So I think it's pretty much there.
They still cutting back to 7 or keeping it at 9?
So 421 still.
Proportional to what they will Yeah, they cut it down to four from the city of Fitchburg, 2 from the city of Verona, and 1 from the town of Verona based on the proportions of what they're anticipating the financing structure will be. I did share with them your thoughts. But
The one guy, too.
Okay.
Obviously went nowhere.
Other questions or comments regarding the chief's report?
That should be signed and taken into effect January. The goal is to have it will be done by January 1st of 2026.
Is that going to formally come through us in any way? It's just a review document, right? We just get a chance to review it.
Yeah, so it's an intergovernmental agreement, so it will, you can see it, but you have no action to take on it because that actually does get signed by the municipalities.
Got it. All right, any other comments or questions regarding the chief's report? Thank you. Moving on to review and approval of accounts payable checks authorized by Chief Anderson. Any questions for Chief regarding checks?
I've been signing a lot of them, and it made me wonder, what are the rules about needing a second signature again?
Sure, so policy does say anything under $5,000 I can sign alone.
Yeah.
Anything over $5,000 with the exception of the ambulance billing company, health and dental, property, like
Property and liability insurance, workers' comp.
workers' comp. I think there's 5.
There's one or 2, yeah.
There's one more that is every month. Like it's the things we pay every month that are over 5,000. That's an ACH. I can share with you the policy because it is actually.
Well, it's just the usual stuff that's over 5,000 is exempted. Otherwise, it's
anything over 5,000.
Unusual things over 5,000
requires a second signature other than mine.
I'm just signing them, but it makes me wonder,
I appreciate no. That is the rules, right? Anything
Okay.
but those 5 reoccurring things every month, anything over $5,000. And you'll still see it in the check report. So everybody does get a chance to
Yeah.
see even the ACHs are listed in there. So
It's the consortium one, too.
the ALS
Medical
consortium that we
director.
pay quarterly, which is 16,000,
8,000.
8,000 quarterly. That's the 5th one. So yeah, every dollar that leaves here is on that check. So just though it says check, all the ACHs are on there as well. So every dollar that leaves here is on that list.
Any other questions for the chief regarding the check detail run? Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the checks.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. On to Resolution 2025-2, approval of GASB 54.
Sure. So now that we have our audit done, this is the thing that we assign every month that says every month we take a certain amount of our fund balance and put it into assigned funds. The first 2 we put on there for inventory and prepaid expenses. That's determined by the audit, so that will not change for the rest of the remainder of the year. And then every month I will update the funding assistance program. So reminder again, that's the money we get from the state. It is per the state can only be spent on it's restricted on what those expenditures are, and we have to report back to the state every year before we get our next allotment what we spent those on. So that is a restricted fund. The sick leave liability, that's the post-retirement healthcare fund. So that just grows every month with interest in it until we have to deposit or withdraw money. And then the same thing for the legal fees for contract negotiations. So essentially those are the 4 assigned funds that every month you're saying we think that we should keep that money in there, and the government says you have to. So.
Any questions for the chief regarding Resolution 2025-2? Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve. Lonsdorf.
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. Resolution 2025-3, assignment of unassigned fund balance to post-retirement healthcare fund account.
Sure. So I shared this with you last month that based on our audit, our unassigned fund balance was over our intergovernmental agreement limitations of 15 to 25%, that our unassigned fund balance was actually up to 40% from a various amount of reasons. Kind of brought it up last month to bring back to your municipalities. I'm not sure if anybody went and talked, otherwise I did that footwork for you. I went and talked with the finance directors, city administrators of the municipalities about some thoughts about what to do with those funds. So the first one here, this resolution 25-3, so that unassigned fund balance, right, was over, we actually have real numbers written down. Yeah, the unassigned fund balance, was $1.6 million. If you take 25% of that out, that left us with roughly about $600,000. Talking with the finance directors, though our intergovernmental agreement says 15 to 25%, both municipalities keep upwards of about a 35% unassigned fund balance, or that reserve there, right, in case of emergencies. What I did is actually raised that amount to 35% of an unassigned fund balance. That left us with about $227,000 is where that took us to, as far as remaining in the balance, in an unassigned fund balance. As I've shared with you, Dale Dow will be retiring here after 28 years with Fitch-Rona at the end of August. So he'll be the 3rd time we're paying out his post-retirement health care. Estimated, I won't know till the day he leaves, estimated that's going to be about $44,000. So as opposed to putting this in the assigned, sick leave and then pulling it out in about 2 months from now, the recommendation is just to leave that in that unassigned fund balance. And if I deduct that, that's roughly $180,000 that is above and beyond our unassigned fund balance. So what the recommendation was from the finance directors, right, just for really good housekeeping rules, is to put together a resolution for you to look at. I will freely admit this was with the help of ChatGPT writing phenomenal resolutions. I know, I admitted it to Jeff, right? I'm trying to fight the system, but it writes a really good municipal resolution. As opposed, so as we talked about, GASB 54 says you're allowed to assign portions of your fund balance for specific purposes. So in honor of GASB 54, what the resolution says is that $180,000 that we have above and beyond, to actually take that and move that into an assigned fund balance of that employee post-retirement healthcare fund. That's actually that WISC account, that Wisconsin Investment Series Cooperative, I think is what it stands for, that I report on at the end of the chief's report there, that WISC fund. That's what this is. So looking to take this money and actually invest that in there. As I've shared, currently, I looked at the real numbers. We have 5 or 6 employees over the age of 53 currently who could retire any time now. So over the next probably 5 years-ish or so, we're going to see the account that's currently in there start to go down as we start to pay that out. So this will actually help keep money in there, continue to put money in there, and keep that funded for when Patrick wants to retire.
Any questions about this resolution?
I have a couple questions. One, maybe silly question. Does the fund cover retirement health care until those who've worked for us reach Medicare coverage age?
No. So it goes in, it is employee managed.
Okay, so it's just like money that we give to them.
We have a third party because we can't give it to them. If we give it to them, we got to tax it.
Yeah, that's okay.
And we used to actually have them send us, like 5, 6, 8 years ago, they used to send us their health insurance premiums and then we paid it.
Right.
It got complicated.
Gotcha.
So we switched over to, it's called Pelion. It's a benefits company.
Okay.
That's the other thing we do with them is any employee who's at their cap, at the end of the year, they are paid out half of their sick time cap into that fund already. So we currently have 5 employees who still work, who actually have a significant amount of money in there. Once they officially retire from us, then they get 100% of that sick time balance paid out into that HRA, and we are done with them. And then the HRA is the one that works with the employee to spend it. So it sounds very much like a flex account. From then, as long as they got money, they can spend it on anything that a flex account would pay for. But we use third party.
Okay. And I think you're maybe flirting with answering my second question, which is that HRA, it doesn't just cover Madison or Wisconsin-based healthcare companies. It can be used nationwide.
It follows the employee everywhere. Yep.
Thank you.
I had one question. When you do a resolution like this, do you have to say this is a one-time thing, or since it's a resolution that it only a continually thing that you're going to do every year? I just wanted to see how it read.
ChatGPT didn't tell me how to do it one way or another. It was actually the recommendation from Misty, the finance director in Fitchburg, to actually change our policy to allow this to just happen every year. But that's a whole nother process of where I can just single one time. You're correct. It doesn't, my guess is if I read this right now, this doesn't allow me to do this in the future without your consent. But it is on the radar now to change the policy to say essentially anything in the future over 35%, Patrick should just move here.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. If we hadn't had these unassigned funds, how would the post-retirement healthcare have been funded?
There's a little line item on the budget every year that puts about $15,000 in that fund to slowly, it probably should be a lot more than that. There's another beautiful spreadsheet that projects what it is. It is fully funded now. So if all 5 of those employees left today, they would all get their money, but it would take it down to about $50,000. Now we have another little group, probably about a good 5-year space before my next group. And part of it is retirement. If they don't retire, so they do have to work until the age of 53. It gets weird with protective services and state retirement, but if somebody leaves at the age of 25, they've been here 10 years and they leave here at 40, they get nothing. They do have to retire, right? Retirement is actually tied to this. So there's a little pot that is put in there every year, but if we have a good chunk of money to put in there now, that would be a much more comfortable place to be.
Other questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The motion passes. Resolution 2025-4, approving expenditure of funding assistance program funds on capital purchase, rapid response, car replacement, and mobile oxygen generating system.
Thanks. So this is, as I mentioned, the funding assistance program is part of our assigned funds. That is money that comes from the state that is very restricted on what we can spend those funds for. Historically, we've gotten about $8,000 to $9,000 every year. A small amount of that is tied to, can only be used for training. The other part, they call it support and improvements. And again, there's a number of things you can spend it on. There's a lot that you cannot spend it on. One, you cannot spend it on people and personnel costs. And it actually is designed to be a budget supplement, not a budget replacement. It is very specific about that. As I mentioned, normally we get about $8,000 to $9,000 a year. Thank you, Governor Evers and the people who supported it. And this year we got about $172,000. So all EMS agencies across the state got a really large chunk of support from the state, which, right, hoping that continues in the future because it's been really helpful to take that burden, right? Some of the things here that would have been more difficult to replace or purchase locally off of our local tax base when we can get those funds from the state. Normally, I haven't come to you, the commission, for approval for those items because they're restricted as they are per the state, and it's usually a couple of $1,000s. Thank you for just signing the checks. No, not really. I do what I can. Right. I do share what we put in front of you, right, what some of those purchases are, but normally they're smaller dollar amount items. With that larger dollar amount, the ask is, right, to, again, full transparency of investing in some purchases of those funds. So I brought it up a little bit last month, and I sent it out. So two of those things, one of them would be using $71,816. It was very, very specific, to allocate for the purchase of an oxygen generator.
Cost that much?
It's $65,000 for the oxygen generator and $10,000 to ship and install.
Oh my gosh.
So I put this in the packet. This is what this looks like. It's the one on the right is actually the smaller one. So currently all of our oxygen we have two sizes tanks, small tanks, big tanks. There's very few places that fill them. We used to use Badger welding, and now we use air gas. It's been a bit of a challenge to get those tanks filled. We have 3 different stations, 3 locations, that have all turned out to be on 3 different routes. So one would think it would be really easy to, I mean, I don't want to pick on the company, but right, it's just been a bit of a challenge to keep those things filled. I actually did look at this a couple of years ago. It's cost quite a bit to purchase. However, this would allow us to be actually self-reliant on filling our own oxygen tanks. We spend I think last year, about $7,500 on oxygen, just getting those tanks filled, and roughly about half of that is service fees. Because we get a service fee every time they drive to all 3 of our stations. We get a service fee for that. So over the long run, this, knock on wood, right, it will be paying for itself because we get to save the environment, right, not have all of those deliveries, not have all those service fees, and again, truly be not dependent on driving oxygen tanks between stations because we're out here and there. This will actually take care of that. So we've worked with the fire chief in Verona. We just have to run a power to where it needs to go, and then it would actually be shipped to us again, we'd be able to fill our own tanks. I've actually talked to a handful of our EMS neighbors as well, who would be very interested in coming to just fill their own tanks off of our system, as opposed to running into the same challenges we have with our gas company.
So you would put this in the Fitch-Rona fire?
We'd go into the Fitch-Rona fire station, and then we would just, we haven't come up with a process yet, but when we have our own tanks, we would just bring them down and fill them up on our own and put them back in the truck.
And the Verona Fire Station is going to have solar panels providing its electricity by October, right?
That I believe that as well, right? So we're going green
Very
all over the
eco-friendly.
place. So that is the ask of that. Again, it's the amount there that doesn't cover the amount of still haven't got a rough quote back for the installation of what the electricity that's required to put it in there, or exactly the true location where it's going to be. We're looking at 2 different spots, but that would get us started. Second ask of theirs, I had brought it up, is looking to replace car 15, which is the oldest of our SUVs. So that is our 2010 Expedition. It is on a 20-year replacement, so we're in year 15 of those 20 years, and it is still fully functional. One of the things we've talked about is when we replace that, right, looking 5 years from now. As I mentioned, we have our rehab trailer, right, that is great. It's got all the soon we'll have an inflatable shelter, right? Water supply, food, nutrition, all that. But it is in a trailer, and I would probably generously say only about a third to half of my staff is comfortable pulling a trailer. So that has presented a bit of a challenge. So one of the goals, or one of the things we had talked about, is taking what our SUV is and turning it into essentially a pickup truck with a box in the back, like a really light rescue. What we'd be able to do is take all the equipment from that rehab trailer and put it in the back of this pickup truck. That would allow us not have to even deal with, right, I got to go hook up a trailer when I'm not emergent, but right, these things get called because something's burning down, and when we're working very quickly, mistakes happen. But we would not have to worry about hooking up a trailer anymore. Other part of this would be, as we are starting to teach more and more first aid CPR classes, and those classes are getting bigger, neither one of the SUVs we have will fit all of our CPR mannequins first aid equipment in it. So any class of any size usually gets to be Patrick's pickup truck with all the stuff in the back. So this would actually be another use of that vehicle, of replacing that car with something that we'd be able to put all of that public education training equipment in. Normally that car, what we have budgeted is, I think, $90,000 to replace that SUV plus all the stuff in it. A pickup truck with a box in the back runs more of about $200,000 to $250,000. So, but with the funds here, if we to allocate $80,000 of it this year, the goal is to hopefully get that another $172,000 next year. We'd be able to pay for the replacement of that vehicle entirely through FAP funds, and we can actually not either option. I've talked with the finance directors about how they want to take it. We can either take it off of our CIP fleet replacement program, or we leave that on there for future use of helping support to replace that vehicle in the future. But this would actually replace that vehicle earlier, again, with a bigger vehicle that would do more for us entirely with state funds. So it would be a multi-year, this year and next year, to 100% fund it. But to take $80,000 of this year's FAP funds and earmark it for the purchase of that vehicle next year, like the rest of our trucks, it's roughly about a 2+ year build. So the goal would be to buy it this year, to purchase it this year. We don't have to pay anything until the chassis, the truck bed itself, is purchased, which probably wouldn't be till next year. And then we wouldn't see it until the back. We wouldn't owe the rest of it probably for 2 years after that, when we'd receive the funds after next year. So again, all this would do would be to take and earmark that money for that purpose, and we would just really put it into essentially an assigned fund for our truck replacement fund in-house. Questions on, so just put a resolution in there. Again, both of those money comes from FAT funds. Historically, I've never asked for that approval. These are some pretty significant dollar amounts, so wanted you to make sure aware that that's my request.
I just have a few questions. Just to reiterate, FAT funds are a state or federal funding? State. Okay.
Comes from the state.
Great. That makes me feel more comfortable, just due to the irrationality of having or not having
fairly
federal
reliable.
funding, depending on the day of the week. My second question is there an ongoing cost associated with like maintenance for the oxygen system?
What I asked that. What I got was essentially is filters. He said there's because I asked about a PM program, and he said we do have to test the oxygen that it's producing. So you take samples and send it in. Other than that, he said you change the filters on it, and it just does what it does until it pops up with valves and things needing to be replaced. So there's no routine maintenance other than filters.
And maybe if other municipalities are filling up on O2, they can help us generate some revenue to pay for those ongoing costs.
I feel like there could be a minimal cost to help us maintain some of that.
My last question is for the cars that are being purchased. I know we like where we can, at least in Fitchburg, to buy electric or hybrid vehicles. And I know for police officers, for example, that's not super possible with like the amount of gas that they use for their electronics and things like that. Just wondering kind of what that read is on the EMS side.
So we've looked at it very similarly, and really, it's until they can come up with something. The problem is all of the flashy things that we put on there. Until they can reliably come up with. There's a company there's a fire department in Texas that uses, I think it's the Rivian. Thank you. They have it figured out, but nobody else. Yes. Yes. So that's where we're at it. We're always looking at it. And should this turn out to be, I've gotten a couple different quotes. I did go out to 2 different places to look at quotes. Should this become cost prohibitive, I truly think it's something we can look at. One of our challenges is in addition to using it for our rehab trailer and our public education, we do actually use it as a response vehicle. So we do use it when we respond out to the highway. I think in the last 3 days we've been out 6, 7, 8 times with the chiefs alone between the 2 cars. So it does go out, flashy lights, part of this as well. There'd be a whole cabinet with all of our stuff on it as well. So we do always keep that in mind at this point. Even in past, I think somebody had brought up in past meetings, we've looked at electric ambulances as well to the tune of $800,000. Yeah, so we're not quite there yet. I did throw that up. So that's one of the companies we're looking at. Essentially, I think we looked at some roll-up doors, but that's what we would be looking for as far as a replacement for our current SUV.
Other questions for the chief regarding this resolution? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
I have a motion to approve 2025-4.
Thank you. Second?
Seconded.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Presentation of the draft 2026 operational budget. This is discussion, no action tonight.
Yep, sure. So historically, kind of just because we only meet once a month, it gets a little tighter on our schedule to get above it, a budget recommended from this commission, this body, to go to the municipalities. So I always like to do the reminder that our budget still, even per our IGA, has to be approved through the normal municipal budget steps. So what the commission here does is recommend the submission of our budget to the municipalities to work through their normal process. So you don't really approve it. It still has to go through your local municipalities. So this is our first, I need to get draft written all over this. This is the first kick for you to see this. We just talk about it this month. I'm going to let you rest and digest on it, provide me any feedback, and then it comes back next month for you to approve it for submission, because by August 1st, it's due to Fitchburg is always about a month ahead of the city of Verona, which is always about a month ahead before the town of Verona. So it's due to the city of Fitchburg by August 1st. So we have to approve it in July to get it to them in time. So adjusting some of the run income again, run income is truly a best guess, figured out 2 different ways. One of those is truly based on a formula broken down into how many calls we anticipate. how many no transports, how many transports, how many mileage, and we get that number based on some historical value, and then we actually get a separate number based on what we've actually gotten in through the door over the last 3 to 5 years in run income. I take the two of those and I average them together, and that's the number I throw up there for our estimated run income. So as we've talked about, our call volume went up 20% last year. We're on track for another 20% this year. So looking at an increase in, keeping in mind that just because our call volume is going up doesn't mean all of those calls get billed. Keeping in mind that Medicare, Medicaid patients don't pay the full amount that we bill. So just because the call volume goes up by 20% by no means our run income goes up by 20%. I completely took out of there what the municipal apportionments would be, because it's still based on that intergovernmental agreement that has yet to make its way through all municipalities. I have no doubt that it will, but I left it out of there just for perspective-wise, so you're not looking at your specific municipality. I will have that for you next month, but just looking at the overall. Interest, as even your local municipalities probably saw, has been phenomenal for the last year. So we did up that. We were significantly over in that. And then our contracted events, that's what we do at the Alliant Energy Center. We do out at Epic, all of the local races and events that we support here. I try to keep it very conservative because those are events that we are asked to do, right? So if we don't, it's not guaranteed income. It's just income that comes from doing those special events. That being said, we really just charge enough to do cost recovery. So if we don't do those events, the expenses aren't really there. But we did raise that significantly based on the last 2 years. It's been fairly reliable. We've been charging about $90,000 to $100,000 in contracted events. So that, again, the design is to cover all of our costs. If our most expensive employee goes out there, we lose a little bit of money. If my cheapest employee goes out there, we make a little bit of money. So it comes out even over itself. Other things that are in here, this is a thank you to Michelle for going through and doing most of the footwork on all of this. I will start with the salary, wages, overtime, and benefits. We are just in those initial stages of contract negotiations that will start in 2026. So these are completely, at this point, a best guess. Until that contract is decided, I don't have a number to put in there for wages or any changes in benefits. So this is truly a best guess. So this most likely will change, but it's forecasting. It's doing something to put something in the books.
It's going to go up, right? It's going to go up from last year. The salary, yes. So,
yes.
So this is a guess of how much up.
Yes.
But it's going up.
Well,
yeah. Yes.
Well, don't tell them that yet. That's a bargaining position.
Yes.
The other part, other part of that is health and dental, that we don't get those rates until October. So this is long past the municipal process before we get those. Historically, we have used 7% for health and dental and 7% for health, 8% for health, and 4% for dental. Well, knock on wood, again, historically, we have not seen those values do that, but that's what we use. So that's wages and benefits. Again, really best guesses. All of the rest of the information that's down here, those true operational costs, are based on about a 3 to 5 year average of those things that we have seen expenditures on. Big changes you're going to see, right? Postage, we've been able to do a lot more ACHs, so the big $400 in savings. Big things you'll see, other increases you'll see is just that medical supplies, right? We probably get the weekly letters. Vast majority of our medical supplies are not made in the United States, right? So we've already been getting all those letters from our supply companies saying anywhere between, I would like to make it up, but it says anywhere between 10 and 400% increases in products over the next year. So they don't know, we don't know. So we just increased that in anticipation. Uniforms is just always continuing to rise, and again, most of our uniforms not made in the United States. Other big numbers, the ones that are the triple digit increases, radio maintenance, medical equipment, and medical equipment maintenance. As we add more equipment, our ventilators, our cots, all of those kind of really switched over to the preventive maintenance plans through the companies. For those of you who remember when we had a whole hydraulic system on one of our cots go about 2 years ago, it was $6,000 to replace the hydraulic system. So they managed to get us into a PM program that started one day before the hydraulic system broke. But it's a pretty significant cost of everything that's, again, it's our cots, our auto loads, our vents, our cardiac monitors. So that's why you see the medical equipment maintenance line go up. It's just time to renew a lot of those contracts. And then very similar with medical equipment, as we just look at historically what we've spent, a lot of the costs of things are just going up as we're, the things that if you remember when we purchase ambulances, we replace most of the durable goods that go inside of them, the cardiac monitors or radios, but things like bags and handheld pulse oximeters, and we have got now electronic stethoscopes with Dopplers on them. Those things are starting to add up as we have to replace those. So that's another big line item that went up. We did increase the accounting fees. Part of the new intergovernmental agreement has asked that we have a full audit every year. Historically, we've done a review, and an audit over the course of the 3 years. So the cost of that full audit will go up because we'll be paying that full cost as opposed to the other 2 years where we've just done a review. Property insurance, we just owe more. The billing service, that's really based off of run volume. So our billing company keeps 6% of everything they collect, right? So encouraging them, the more they collect, the more they get to keep. So I don't want to say that that's a pass through, but that is a best guess based on what we anticipated run income, and then 6% of that. Overall, right? So then overall, a best guess of expenses for salary and wages is about a 6.3% increase. Everything evens out down here in those operational expenses to about a drop of about 1%, increasing our overall operational budget for 2026 to about 5.1% for next year. And really best guess. Any questions?
Questions, right?
That? Yes.
I'll kick it off. And this was a question I asked last month. It looks like there's some progress in some non-transport increases coming from the state. This is a draft. Plenty of things could change at any number of levels, but at what point would that qualify for a additional revenue source for the district? How is that tracked currently? If it's a reimbursement versus an actual payment to the district?
So there's actually two different bills. They're talking about one of those that Medicaid reimbursement one that I just sent in is a reimbursement. So we're gonna see what's gonna happen with 2023 and 2024. With it, that 2 years of knowledge, I don't know that I will have that information to be able to plug in here for 2025. That would create, under the run income, this spreadsheet is of course tied into about 30 other little sheets. You just get the PDF of it here. It would create its own little line item there that would increase anticipated run income by that amount. The no transport fee one, I think that really remains to be seen what's going to happen with it. And then my guess is in a year from now, when we kind of see what that looks like, we'll be able to plug that into run income as well. So it'll fall into that increased run income, which will ultimately lower the required, it'll lower what the municipalities are required to pay in. That makes sense.
Got it. The unscheduled overtime line item going up fairly significantly, is that connected to your proposal to have some peak time staffing, or is that completely unrelated?
It's completely unrelated, unfortunately. Two things that were in there. So we actually took that off of real unscheduled overtime from last year. It is I don't want to say part of the pass-through, but part of that is the pass-through for those contracted events. because all contracted events are unscheduled overtime. So the increase from 48,000 to 94,000 went into that so right, the ideal is they balanced each other out. The $46,000 on top balanced the 46,000 on the bottom, because we get that from our auditors every year of why was your unscheduled overtime so high? It's like, because we under budgeted contract events, and right, it just dumps itself in there. So that's part of that increase there. So it's about half of that increase. The other part of it is we changed last year as part of our contract the opportunity for when staff gets mandated back to work. If we have open shifts that don't get picked up by part-timers, staff gets mandated back to work. We opened up an opportunity for them to volunteer to come. It's always been an opportunity for them to come back to pick up open shifts that are part-timers don't pick it up. We added the incentive in there. If they volunteer to pick up those open shifts, they actually move down to the bottom of that mandate list. So now they can essentially pick up an overtime shift when it works for them, as opposed to Patrick or Devin or Jeff calling and saying at 2 a.m, "Hi, I need you to come to work today." So that truly, at least for probably half of our staff, is incentivized a lot of extra shifts. Our current policy or our current process is all of our shifts, our LTs get their first kick at it, up to however far I schedule it out at 30 days. If a full-timer puts in for it, I will assign it to a full-timer at 30 days, kind of. So those LTs get their first kick at it, but want to give the courtesy of our full-timers to be able to schedule their schedule out. So I do believe that that has actually seen a lot more full-timers pick up those open shifts. It's costing us more. It really helps filling shifts. So then I'm not struggling to try to fill shifts 2 days before and mandating people back to work at double time, where they can actually voluntarily pick up the unscheduled overtime at time and a half.
And I think our mandates last year were somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 plus, and we've only done 6 mandates so far this year. And I think the reason for that is because they're voluntarily picking up at least 12 hours and dropping to the bottom of the mandate list. So even if that amortized out over the course of the next 6-7 months, we would be way under what we did last year, I think.
Great. And then the last question was, and if you mentioned it, sorry, the reserve funding is blank. Is that also IGA related, or is this because we're in pretty good shape for reserves at this moment?
The latter.
Okay.
So for the last 2 years, when our reserve funding was down to about that 10%. So it's either been the last 2 or 3 years we've actually put a line item in there to bring the reserve funding up. Last year we were at the 2024 audit we were at 24%. So put another large chunk of money in there, plus various other reasons. So that's what brought us up this year to that 40%. A lot more than that $12,000 got us up there. But yes, so we are currently over, right? We're at 35%. Our reserve is funded. So there's no reason. So part of that, it's very, again, kudos to Misty and her beautiful managing of accountingness has looked at this for the last 3 years and has really set us up, right? So now there's that $112,000 that we were able to put into our reserve funding for last year to meet the reserve funding, and now has actually also offset increases that we are seeing for 2026. So yeah, that's why it's blank.
Great, thank you.
I had a few questions too, related. One is your workman's comp went way down, and I'm wondering why that usually doesn't happen in any business that I know of. So I'm just kind of wondering how that goes down.
We had 2 or 3 lost time work incidents that fell off.
Okay.
Because they believe they look at Jeff knows more about this. They look at the last 3 years. So yeah, those 2, I think we had 2 of them in the same year, so it went up. They have now fallen off, so now we're back down. Am I explaining that correctly?
That makes sense. Okay.
And any other part of that is we implemented at that time 3 years ago pretty extensive light duty program. So if they do get hurt and they are off the ambulance and they can do most of the work that we do, like teach CPR classes or do education stuff, community paramedic stuff, they're required to come in and do that. And if they don't want to do it, then they have to take their own time. But they're offered light duty. So we don't have those lost time injuries.
Okay, that makes sense. And then with the office supplies and the facility furnishings, those went up significantly. Was that, do you have a new office or a new position that you need to fill with products?
The facility for, let me look here. Office supplies.
35.
I'm gonna say, do you remember what that is, Michelle, or is that just historical spending?
Well, part of it is we have a new deputy too.
So we actually had to, that's why historically it went up, because we had to furnish a third office.
Right.
A bookcase, Post-it notes, files, and the facility furnishings, that went up. So mattress replacements.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it's weird. That's the weird things of mattress replacements: light bulbs, mattress covers, fans, lamps, the things. So I still believe we are probably one of the most blessed services in our county, that our oldest station is just now 10 years old, but our oldest station is just now 10 years old. So the Verona station is 10 years old. The next one, our Fitchburg station, is now 8 years, and I think Station 3 will be coming up on almost 6 years. So we're starting to see some of the equipment, like I said, mattresses need to be replaced.
Okay, and then my last one was related to Patrick's, with the income that you went up 11%. You do kind of look at significantly how much we maybe do not collect, and you average that in there?
Yes. So, and that's it. We look at the percentage of, said we created the checks and balances probably about 3 years ago of guesstimating run income, or the number of runs, and then we truly look at how many we don't charge for, how many never see a bill. Right, so fire, because the fire standbys count in there, that never generates a bill. Look at our no transports, how many of those never see a bill versus how many of them get that no transport fee. How many residents, how many non-residents, how many miles. We got rid of supplies a couple of years ago. We just raised our base rates. So we look at that average over the last couple of years, and then figure out, we get from our billing company, we do get a beautiful report that says you collect X percent of what you ultimately bill out. So based on all that math, this is what we would bill and this is what we would collect, gives me a number. And then we started tracking the last 5 years of actual dollars in. Of course, they're actually surprisingly really close. But we take the two of them and I average them together, and that's what I use. So there's two different ways to look at that. I don't take the higher number or the lower number.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then my last one was on the contracted events. I think you mentioned it's kind of a wash, so you kind of bill what you get. I mean, I guess my question is, if we need to kind of get more budget in there, are we charging enough for those, or are they worth it if it's unscheduled overtime?
So we raise that rate every year. So we look and see what it costs to send my most expensive employee there, what their overtime rate plus retirement and worker, what all the benefits. Essentially, it turns into send my most expensive employee there. Costs us, 100% cost recovery is about $65 an hour. So that's what we use. And then we always send a crew of 2, so we double it. So we charge $140 an hour. The math worked out right, 120, 140. What we use for, we charge that, and that's a flat fee. So it doesn't matter who I send, we always charge the $140 an hour. So if I send my most expensive employee there, and we only charge for the time we're there, right? So they come in half an hour before, we don't charge for that time. Most of the time, all of our events, our closest, the farthest we have to drive is the Alliant Energy Center. So when we don't charge them for the 3 miles it takes us to drive out there. So there are some costs that are not built into that. But if I also spend my newest employee there, they're not costing us $65 an hour. So I do believe we are 100% cost recovery for all those contracted events, and probably actually a little bit above that, because my most expensive employees don't pick up most of those events.
And then on a side note with that, is doing these contracted events ever affect where you have to call other ambulances because they're on the contracted event, so then you have to call somebody else for calls, or how does that work?
All of these are all additional staffing. It's actually a state administrative rule that I cannot use my 911 ambulances for those contracted events. So this is all and above. If I can't staff the ambulance, I try not to, but if I don't have two people to go, we have sent one person in a car. So there's at least somebody there can start care. I'll send my bikes, send my ATV. But if we don't have anybody, we do not call people in, and we do not use 911 ambulances. We will always have 3 ambulances available in the city.
Okay, thank you.
The other part of that is that we have a good working relationship with the other affiliates, the other 311 affiliates, especially the city of Madison. So if we can't staff it, and as long as I give them 3 days, I can call the chief over there and say, I can't staff this event. And within most of the time, an hour, he'll say, I got it covered for you. So, and vice versa. There's times they've called us and said, hey, can you send somebody over? We need some help, and we do.
Yeah. Again, we're a pretty blessed county. We work very collaboratively with our partners around us.
I have a kind of random question, just because the way that Medicare and Medicaid plays into this super interests me, mostly because all of my business clients are healthcare providers. And so I know some of my hospitals where they have a larger disproportionate amount of Medicare or Medicare patients, Medicaid or Medicare, there's a reimbursement challenge. So roughly for like our population, are we on average, like what's the breakup between people who need ambulance services who are private payer versus Medicare, Medicaid? That would be great. It was such a specific question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, a very specific question. I get that report monthly.
Awesome.
And that's what we use to actually, that is what is used to take the overall, the overall collection rate is based on all of those breakups and all those payers.
I would love to know that just from a nerdy perspective.
It's intriguing. We have it broken down between City of Fitchburg,
that would be fascinating. Thank you.
It's it's a geek out thing. I get it.
From here, after discussion, what are the next steps to get the budget finalized?
You need to mull over this. See if you have any questions, comments, concerns. This will get put together in a draft, probably even before you approve it next month. And we'll go to the finance directors to look at it, and they will get to mull over it and ask the same questions you ask. It potentially needs more massaging to make sure that it's very accurate. I have a rough layout of how this will work with the new intergovernmental agreement to look at the apportionments. So next month this will come back with any of those smaller changes in it, and then what the guess of the apportionments by municipality will be in, and then next month you'll approve for moving forward to the municipalities.
Okay. Any other questions, comments about the draft budget for now?
I will, since Alder Lytle brought it up. The other part of this, staffing, peak time staffing. So as much as I want to hide it in there and get it in there, I'm not going to hide it in there. I'm going to follow the rules. So I've talked about, right, so we did 5,100 calls last year with 3 ambulances, right? That's averaging 15 calls a day, which, as I said, right, is sometimes 5, is sometimes 25. 25 calls in one day for 3 ambulances, a lot. So looking to the future, as I mentioned as well, right, 45 times last year, the city of Madison or Middleton or Mount Horeb, today almost Oregon, right, Okay, yeah, because probably the 2 calls that I was on and the city came, So again, we're never going to be able to cover our own calls. It's just a matter of we have to work well with each other. But with all those things in mind, we need to continue to look at expanding, right, staffing, and what some of those options are. I put it in budget last year. I get it. I talked with Mayor Julia again today, right? He said, no new people. I'm like, I'm going to continue to try. So, right, to staff one more ambulance 24/7 is hiring 7 people that's a lot. So trying to figure out how different options of how we can increase staffing, right, to meet the need in the short term. So last year asked for hiring four full-timers to staff to staff one more ambulance, 7 hours or 12 hours a day for 7 days a week would require hiring 4 people. I asked for that last year and it was laughed out of the thing. I get it, right? It's a lot. Hiring 4 full-timers is a lot. Unfortunately, we are a job and a system where to add additional staffing, it's not like hiring one more person for Parks and Rec, hiring one more person for building. I need a minimum of 4 people to put one truck in service. So still lots of moving parts to make this actually happen. My original proposal was 7 days a week, but looking at this, what I'm asking for is wouldn't actually be hiring any full-timers. It would be a 2.5 full-time equivalent. So it would be 5 days a week from 7A to 7P. So 5 days a week, peak time. So 7A to 7P, it's really like 8 to 8, but I think 7 to 7 works better for us in our current options. But looking at bringing in part-timers, or our LTE pool, 5 days a week from 7A to 7P. That gives us a 4th truck 5 days a week during our daytime hours. The job functions is what we do, right? Here's the justification of looking at those numbers. So our 44-year average, right, since 1977-ish, is our call volume goes up 4.6%. In the last 5 years, we've gone up 9%. Right. So that curve of our call volume has gotten steeper in the last 3 years than it has in the last 44. Right. Some of the contributing to those, right, is just the growth of our municipalities. The biggest contributor is truly that assisted living senior housing memory care that we continue to build in our municipalities. And it's both municipalities that are very impacted by this. That our call volume just continues to go up, right? We have an aging population in all of our municipalities.
Do you have a dollar amount that goes with that 45 times ambulance outside the district were needed? A loss?
So if we average, off the top of my head, it's 400, our collection rate is $404 per call. So it's never going to 100% cover the cost of an ambulance.
I'm just saying 45 times ambulance and then a cost. So money talks.
So the number to use would be $400 per call. So, and that's part of it. As I mentioned, here's the rest of the proposal. Knowing, as I mentioned, right, it would be a moving thing. The union has to agree to this because technically it's a violation of our union contract, right? We're scheduling non-union people on truly scheduled hours, whether it's a written agreement or a handshake agreement that says, and I agree to me, this solution is baby stepping us to where we need to go, right? If we start with 5 days a week, 12-hour days, the goal next year, right? Maybe we increase that to 7 days a week. The ultimate goal is to make this either a permanent part-time position or eventually it goes to full-time. Part of Patrick's plan with this is I have staff, right? We currently have one full-time one of my LTs who stepped down from a full-time position because of childcare, right? So I actually reached out to that employee. I'm like, if I could tell you I can guarantee you 12 hours a day for Mondays and Thursdays every week, could you find childcare for 2 days a week? And that was part of the challenge of our current rotating schedule is like their shifts change all of the time. But if they knew they were working Mondays and Thursdays for 12 hours, childcare doesn't become as much of a challenge. To do that, and I can completely appreciate it, that becomes a permanent part-time position, which would ultimately be a benefited position, which would be a union position or could be a union position. That requires more, right? Because now I have to pay more. They end up on a salary scale. They get paid more than a part-timer gets, and they get benefits. But to me, it's a shorter stretch, right, than my current position. To now, the next year, we hire 2 part-timers with benefits, right? So my benefit. Right, the percentage goes up a little bit each year as we increase that to a permanent part-time position versus me asking you for what it costs, the $500,000 it costs to hire 4 new people in 1 year to benefit that, or for a benefit position. So I will be, providing you say it's okay, I will be asking for this. Here's the math. Right, roughly 2 paramedics on 1 ambulance for 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's 120 hours, right? The assumption would be that if I took that 1 employee who said I can work every Tuesday and Thursday, if they worked, they could work up to 48 hours a week, if that opportunity was there. So there's a potential for them to earn overtime. So this is a very liberal, I guess, estimate on the wages for times 52 hours a week. So wages alone would be about $156,000. We add in their retirement because they would go over that retirement cap. We add in their FICA. We add in their increased workers' comp. As we talked about mandates, now this probably is a little, I don't want to say inflated, but it's probably a little heavier number. One of the options as well, Sun Prairie EMS tried this a few years ago. What they did is if they happened to have a sick call that day, as opposed to mandating somebody back to work, they actually just pulled somebody off that 4th ambulance and put them to work on a scheduled shift. So that actually saves mandates, saves us having to inconvenience somebody for at least the day while they're working, as well as it saves us the double time that would be for a mandate. And now I have somebody who is already coming to work anyways, and I'm not having to bother anybody. So there's a potential reduction in that double time hour of about $10,000. So the total cost is about $100, and this is using the LTE pool I currently have. We would probably have to hire more of them or open that up for more of them because this is, it is significantly more hours. At this point, again, unbenefited. Eventually, it will become a benefited position and it's a union represented position. But at this point, it's $190,000 to help alleviate that crazy call volume that's been going up. Any questions on this?
I have a question. So just so I understand, based on the new structure, or based on the structure of the new IGA, this cost would be 40% paid by Fitchburg, or put in number XYZ there, majority paid by Fitchburg, then by City of Verona, then by Town of Verona. Okay. I ask that only because you are not the only first responders asking for extra people and extra monies. And I personally think you should always ask for more people when you need them, even if you know the answer is going to be no. Because I think advocacy is incredibly important, even if just for staff morale, but to make sure our constituents understand the work that goes into this. So I think even if you think it's a no, you should still ask. But I only bring that up because as probably everyone here knows, we also had a failed referendum in the fall. And so our constituents, unfortunately, did not invest in that. And so we are now also trying to struggle with that. So that's just kind of sharing thoughts on that I would love to fund this right away because I have children and I have used EMS before multiple times. But just wanted to understand the breakup of that new IGA applies to every cost we're talking about here.
Yes. Gotcha. Yes, you're correct. This would be on top of what so it would plug into what I presented earlier, add $190,000 into staffing, bringing it up. Correct. And that's why it's separated out, because it kind of has to go through its own little, yes, everybody wants additional positions. And yes, Mayor Radafrada has already said, don't ask for positions, but don't ask for positions. So
I'm going to say ask for positions, maybe don't expect them. Yeah. I think asking is the right thing. And I appreciate the really creative budgeting that it's clear that all of you are doing in terms of this will reduce this cost.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly appreciated and work that often goes unnoticed.
I think to me, this is about the most cost efficient. It's not going to be the easiest. It's not, right? There'd be a lot easier ways to do it, but I think to do this will really help alleviate exactly what you said. Part of it, I want to say morale. I know I got an employee who's in the second half of his 48 and he's getting his backside handed right. He said, I'm ready to go to his other station because he's working at a busy station. So it's needed.
Well, I think I'd also point out that on the 2026 budget, the run income is expected to go up $225,000. And so the ambulance service has been going up 9% every year pretty much in run volume. And with increased charges, the collection amount is going to offset the amount of wages that are going up. If there's more runs, you got to have more people doing them, basically. So,
yeah, another option for this, and I've shared it with staff. I'm hoping they've listened as I've shared with it. Right, I know we're never going to 100% cost recover. We're never going to have enough runs to cover $190,000. However, with that fourth ambulance, right, available to run calls, we also have the ability to leverage essentially interfacility calls. Hospice, Grace, is in Fitchburg, and we get calls once a month. I mean, it's slowed down now, but for a while, we're getting calls once a month. Can you go to the west side of Madison and bring somebody to hospice? Can you run to Janesville and bring somebody to hospice? My plan is not to go to hospitals and return people to nursing homes. Right, I'm gonna let the private ambulances take care of that. But we have Encompass Health. We have an inpatient rehab center here. Those patients are coming by ambulance from those hospitals. So there's another opportunity for us here to leverage, right, the ability for us to have another ambulance to respond to 911 calls. And the off chance all four of them are out, right, within half an hour, I can give you an ambulance that can run again to Gammon Road and drive to hospice, that can run to Stoughton and come to hospice. So it's not no desire to go to Monroe, Mayo, or right, to Rochester, not looking to get into that business, but it's absolutely something we could do, right, to help increase the run income that'll help offset this cost in the future. We just don't have the ability to do it now because state statute says I cannot take a 911 ambulance out of service to go to an interfacility. So any other questions on this? I wanted to let you know I'm presenting this as well. Yeah.
Just a couple of questions. I know you utilized a City of Fitchburg form for this, just in order to allow them to compare apples to apples, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it'll get unFitchburged for the other two municipalities.
No, honestly, I think it's nice to have that as a baseline. And yes, I know come budget time, we're all challenged in terms of managing growth and additional revenues, but also levy limits. And I think it's still a little bit beyond my ability to translate, but I know that because Fitch-Rona is an independent district, that does not hit our levy limits as a city of Verona, and I'm assuming it's the same situation in Fitchburg. So one upside of this approach, which is stepwise moving, is that it allows us to work our way up to what it would be to staff another full-time ambulance, as opposed to some giant jump in a future year. So I think it's worth pointing that out, as I'm sure you have been having discussions with the leadership in the cities.
Yep, thank you. I did share this with both the finance directors from both cities, and again, the one of the very big pros of being a district is if we meet the certain criteria of exempting any of our increases from tax levy limits, and this could potentially be part of that. So, again, any other discussion? It's really a discussion item, not an action item.
I just had a question. Do you have 4 operating ambulances now?
I have 6.
You have 6, okay.
We normally had the 5, right? 3 frontline, 2 reserve. In anticipation of this happening next year, when I get the support for it, right? The goal was to have it in place in 2025. It didn't happen. We're going to keep asking, and knowing that lead time with ambulances is years out. So that is why we actually kept the one and sold one, and now have that fleet of 6, knowing that hopefully in the near future we'll have 4 full-time ambulances out in the streets, and 2 to it for reserves that are able to rotate through. As of even with the 6 we have and the 3 full-time right now, I've got one sitting at Kaiser getting a muffler replaced, and I got one out at Truckstar getting some body damage work. I'm like, I have one backup ambulance right now. So we're, again, sitting in a pretty good spot.
I have another comment maybe on the budget. It's I think you've mentioned that one of the big reasons for the increase in numbers of people calling the ambulance is because both Fitch-Rona and Fitchburg have approved several senior housing complexes or assisted living, or I'm not sure what all they are. If the two cities are going to approve buildings like that, maybe they have to also realize that they come with a lot of costs, and one of them is, ambulance service. I don't know how much of an option the cities have to say yes or no to these things. I know a lot of development just gets sort of forced on us. But
I think it's a really good point.
Yeah.
To say there is, we approve or don't approve everything that's built in our city.
Right.
Like short of solar farms. That's the state and like 4 people at the state.
There's a
We
lot
don't
of
really
stuff
get
that
a
you
say.
technically approve it, but you don't really have that many options. It's if it's part of your development plan, it's just going to get approved.
But I do think the point is it's a really good point that you bring up in terms of like, after we reach a certain capacity, and I'm sure Mike Zimmerman will correct me on all the things I said incorrectly here in this meeting later, because he's a development genius. But like, if we've reached our capacity in the amount of senior living facilities, do new senior living facilities or does there become a new like infrastructure tax? Like, we want to provide housing to our aging population, and if it's disproportionately causing fees to be incurred, like that, I think it's a great point that you bring up.
So some municipalities, not only around the state, but around the country, have started imposing public safety impact fees to some of these types of facilities. And it's not meant to be punitive in the sense of trying not to get them to start those businesses in the communities, but it's meant to offset those costs and the strain on those resources. So that really does, I think, start at the city and the township level for approving those.
And examples of those in Wisconsin?
That I would have to check on.
That would be interesting. Thank you for bringing that up.
Of course.
It is on my radar to figure out. We have had a handful of, even of the last 5 years, or I'm going to say even 3 years, we have had at least 3 or 4 senior housing memory care assisted living centers open. It would, I would say, be easy enough, but I think it's not outside the realms of possibility to find out what that impact is and at least provide. I talked to Mike, I think it was 2 months ago, when he said, somebody's shopping around for a new 180 bed. He said, where do you want it? And I'm like, do you really want to know my answer for that, right? Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it's call volume, right? It supports us, it's jobs, it's people, it's stuff. As long as we continue to get the support, we will do it. We need the support to do it. So I'm trying to find what that number is so I can share with economic development. I'm like, that is great that you're bringing here. I just want you to know, for every 100 beds you bring in, we're looking at another 150 EMS calls. I'm making that number up, but I think that number is attainable to find out as for perspective wise, because I know Verona is also looking at another senior housing.
The other thing that can happen is the cities can negotiate with these new employers or new buildings that are about providing more services themselves. Every time somebody falls down, they don't have to call the ambulance, but they do if they don't have a nurse on staff, or they don't have someone who can pick someone back up and put them back in bed or in a chair and assess them.
So we work really hard with them, both communities, with those facilities, to work through those issues. So that part of my responsibility monthly is to reach out to them. There's so many factors with that, and it's staffing on their end, it is equipment, it is policy, and so all of those calls that we go to, a lot of those calls are not revenue generated calls. They're calls that we go to and we assist, and we get back into quarters, but we're out of service for 30 minutes or 40 minutes. So that really impacts us a great deal, not only from an employee morale standpoint, but from a revenue standpoint, we're utilizing services that aren't generating any money, and we're turning calls over to other municipalities because we're not available.
Basically, subsidies for these the venture capitalists who own these places. I mean, more and more elderly living places are run by people who are making a lot of money from them. And so to the extent that the ambulance service is providing a service for nothing, we're essentially subsidizing their businesses. So.
And there has been some movement on the eastern part of the state, Waukesha County in particular, where EMS agencies are starting to build facilities for those, we're going to pick grandma up off the floor and put her back in the chair. And they don't have staffing to do it, nor they have a policy that says they can't lift people, and they call us. Those agencies on the other eastern part of the state that are actually charging the facility for their time to go there and do that. And I have mentioned that to some of the places that we go to quite frequently, that if they don't come up with some kind of policy or help in their facility, that we will start charging them. I mean, we want to be good partners, and they pay taxes and all of that too, and we understand that. But at some point, it is stretching resources that, because they won't hire people to help, then we wind up supplementing that, and that's not fair to anybody.
Well, that's great. I'm 73 right now, and I hope you guys work this out in the next 10 years or so.
We'll charge you.
So I don't have to have an ambulance come and pick me up.
Sooner.
Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong. There is some legislation kind of being circulated about this at the state level as well, correct?
Yeah, we've heard there has been some proposed legislation about, as Jeff had mentioned, there are facilities they call themselves no-lift facilities. Yeah. There is some legislation pending to get rid of that. The consequences of that, who knows, right? Somebody's got to enforce it. But as Jeff said, we want to be good partners. We get it. We go to homes for people who fall. It is written in our. We do have the ability in our policy to charge facilities or homes or patients where it potentially becomes an abuse of the system. It's been years. I have never had to do it. I know Brian, prior to me, they had to use it a couple times. I think I would just say the threat, but the information of, and I don't want to say it's a threat. It's a service we provide. But as I'm asking for more staff, as we're running 30 calls a day, right? It's part of our job. I get it, right? But we're trying to alleviate provider burnout.
I think part of the community paramedic program that we've tried to adopt the last at least year and a half is to really provide resources. Instead of sending an ambulance, is there a possibility that maybe I or Devin can go and help somebody without having to call, an expensive ambulance to go out of service? And we have started to do some of that with our falls prevention program. I don't know if we've had a really big impact on the reduction of falls, but I know we've had an impact on patients that have called us several times over the course of a week or 2 weeks or a month, where me spending some time with some other resources in the county to get her some resources has reduced the number of calls that we've gone down for her. And so there's a cost to that, and that cost is built in a salary already. So I think that program just takes time, and it's working, but there's some other options out there as well.
Question on that then, for when you get those calls to those facilities, do you kind of keep track of why you were called and why they gave you the reason they called you, so that, some of them don't have registered nurses, and their policy is if we don't have a registered nurse on staff, we won't pick them up off the floor. My mother-in-law was at a facility like that. Yeah. So they would call an ambulance every time she fell. So I just kind of want to know, and that's something too at the city levels, they could ask to see their policy before they build the facility and say, I'm just letting you know we're not okay with that policy.
Most of the time we hear from staff saying, we have been to see so-and-so, or we've been to this location X amount of times. Can you follow up with it? But I know Jeff also, as part of his job is to see, right, we have been to 101 Lincoln Street, which is the fire station, so I'm not picking on any facilities, right? We've been to 101 Lincoln Street 12 times this month, and then that's part of Jeff reaching out to their facility director and saying, and we just start with, are you aware that we have been, because maybe they aren't aware that this is happening after hours, and that, like, are you aware we've been here 15 times this month? And maybe usually that fixes part of the problem. Or what can we do to help you? Or we want to be good partners. How can we make this better?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The ones that I have done that in the last year, since January, they're not aware of the amount of calls that we go to their facilities, and we break it down by number of calls, what kind of calls are we going to, what times of days are we going to, and sometimes they can correlate that with the staff that they have on or the lack of staff that they have on. And facilities have made improvements, but like Patrick said, most of the time they're not aware of what's happening. The staff level knows, but the director of nursing or the administrators don't have an idea. And so we're trying to point that out to them, not to say, hey, we're not coming, and that's not the case, but to say, how can we help you? What do you need to do to improve this? One of the facilities in our community went and bought a Hoyer lift. They realized that some of their partner facilities out on the eastern side of the state, Waukesha and Racine County, were being charged. And when I said, but that's an option here too, and they said, we've purchased a Hoyer lift. So all of our staff know how to lift patients up. We shouldn't be calling you for that. But you are. We'll take care of it. And they have. So it's just a lot of work to stay on top of that. But I think that reduces call volume, reduces staff burnout for sure. And will certainly help with increased staffing to get those peak time hours to provide services to those patients that really need an ambulance.
I do think, just to kind of put a bow on this, it would be helpful to have like maybe a couple examples or a list of things. I think your point of policies was a really great one. Like when something comes in front of plan and then comes to city council, I have not yet reached the age where I have a parent or loved one that I have to know that level of detail. It would be great to be able to ask, what is your policy on RN staffing? Is this going to put a disproportionate amount of impact on our response services? We do the same thing with, there's a bar in town that's had some violence breakout. And my first question was, should we look at revoking their liquor license? Like, you kind of lose a privilege if you're going to disproportionately tax services. So if you have any ideas of that list, I think that would be super helpful to be able to share with our council as well.
And we'll look into that. Absolutely.
Any other conversation about this topic, comment about this specific topic? Do you have what you need from us to move forward?
Yes, the plan is next month you will get a massaged budget to take a look at. If you have any questions before then, please ask.
Next agenda item is other business as allowed by law. Is there any other business?
Alder Vafadari, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself since it's your first meeting with us.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Vafadari. I am Alder for District 4 in the city of Fitchburg. My apologies for not being able to join you in the last meeting. And as the chief said, I thought I was going to be on a train back from Chicago, but I grabbed an earlier one. So super pleasure to be here. I was super excited to join the commission. I've been on council since 2024. I think that's right. Previously, I was on the Verona area school board. And so I have a passion for education. I think our community is a super special place. I actually feel very strongly about both our Verona communities and Fitchburg, and so this was fun to kind of be back in that same space. And as I mentioned before, I have a 4- and 7-year-old, so I've used EMS services before, and I appreciate you always. So thanks for letting me ask a bunch of questions. I'm very sorry for all of my questions in advance, but they will probably continue.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. I guess I have one comment before we adjourn, is that we have a bunch of new folks. We got some change out, and some of us have been here a while, but I thought tonight's meeting was a valuable use of time. We had really good dialogue. We have a lot of talent in the room. I thought that was great. And I know it's a big deal for you and your leadership team, Michelle and gang. When you show up, it's a richer meeting. So I'm not saying come to every meeting. I know you got a lot of stuff going on, but when you're here, it's a richer dialogue. So thank you for participating, and this was a really good meeting. Thank you. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I know.
No.
We'll fill in some other name.
We made it for you, don't worry.
All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned, 8:38.